you guys all know, are originating here from Big 12 country as a Big 12, just non-Power 2 centric show. We have taken a lot of shots at the SEC. Deservedly so throughout football season because of how the SEC and its fans and media conglomerate, mafia, was acting. It deserved a little bit of a shot taken at it. But we got to be fair. Fair is fair. And so when the SEC deserves credit, we need to come back around on the other side. And I will say the thing that I'm about to talk about here might, you could make the case, cause some financial issues for the Big 12. But before you panic, it doesn't have to. So I will explain. I don't talk a lot of in-depth Big 12 basketball here on this channel. Frankly, it's just because, I know I've had people ask before, it is just because of viewership. Like, there's not as much interest in college basketball as there is with college football. If you want that, definitely subscribe to the newsletter, ofbnews.com. You'll get a little bit more of that. But when it becomes relevant from a big picture standpoint, we are going to talk about it. And obviously that does enter the lexicon and the conversation quite a bit, particularly when it's, like Brett Yormark wanting to decouple Big 12 basketball rights to maximize the amount of money that the conference is making. Or if he wants to add UConn, which is something that popped back up again the other day, thanks to that Heartland College Sports article. If Brett Yormark wants to add UConn, which ties into decoupling the basketball rights, making more money through hoops, we'll talk some hoops. And the same with Gonzaga, which was another flirtation that the Big 12 has had. We've got one of those that has now come to my, it's been, I was going to say come to my attention. It has been in my purview for a long time here, but I feel like it's become an elephant in the room. We have a bit of an elephant in the room situation here. And that is, guys, we always hype up Big 12 basketball. It's great. I don't think anything is damaged long-term. If you look at the brands in this conference, I mean, the national champion head coaches that you have in this conference, the brands that are there, Kansas, obviously leading the charge, but Houston, Baylor, Iowa State, Texas Tech. Like, you've got a lot of really good basketball. But Arizona, keep forgetting that Arizona's in the league now. Arizona in the conference. Like, you've got a lot of basketball firepower here. And deservedly so, we hype it up. But it's been disappointing this year. This has been a disappointing year for the conference, okay? If you go check out anything like power rankings, if you're more of a traditionalist, like you want power rankings, you don't care about analytics, who is Ken Palm, who is Bart Torvik, I don't care. If you go that route, I would tell you that many power rankings right now are putting the Big 12 as the third best conference in the country. Not just behind the SEC, but also behind the Big 10. And if you go look at Ken Palm right now, I just did earlier today, the Big 12 is the third best conference in the country. This is supposed to be, or everybody thought it would be, far and away the best basketball league in the country. Now we're sitting here looking at it like, oh boy, all right, well, this is just number 3, huh? Not great. Kansas was the preseason number 1 team, according to a lot of people. I mean, they're barely beating lower level Big 12 teams at home right now. And that's not meant to be like a slight at UCF. UCF kind of middle of the pack. But a couple Saturdays ago, I mean, I watched K-State go into Allen Fieldhouse and play a pretty darn competitive game there. This is K-State that's multiple games below 500 right now. Has been arguably the most disappointing team in the country. Kansas just doesn't really have it. I mean, they've lost 3 of their last 7 Big 12 home games going back to last year. Last year was kind of a disappointing season for the Jayhawks. The beat goes on this year. Saying all of that, they are still by most a top 15 team, which seems a little crazy to me, both in terms of where you'd rank it and then that we would be criticizing a top 15 team. But Kansas is supposed to be the real breadwinner of this thing and the biggest part of the reason that it's such a valuable basketball entity, right? Cincinnati, top 25 team. They're just trying to cling on to that NCAA tournament bubble right now. Things have not gone well for Wes Miller since he started Big 12 play. Baylor, they're like on the 8-9 line right at this moment. Looks like VJ Edgecombe maybe is figuring some things out and taking it to another level. That could definitely help them throughout the rest of the season. But I don't know. For right now, Baylor has still been a bit of a disappointment. Arizona, great in Big 12 play, but they did start 4-5 this year, so there hasn't been a ton of hype built around the Wildcats. K-State, there was a lot of offseason hype because of the amount of money that they spent. They've been awful. Guys, I won't sugarcoat that at all. It's been a dreadfully disappointing year. And then there's just a lot of blah in the conference. You look at like Colorado, they still haven't won a league game. Oklahoma State, TCU, K-State. You got a lot of bad teams. You got a lot of bad teams in this league right now. So it's been a disappointing year. And fair is fair. I'm going to call it out. Just like with all the SEC talk that there has been around here, which was well-deserved for what their football output was and their football performance was. Guys, the SEC has been absolutely loaded in basketball this year. Loaded. Okay? Auburn looks like potentially the best team in the country. Literally everybody is in the top 68 of the net except for South Carolina. That is wild, but the SEC is loaded with tons of depth, tons of great teams at the top. It might wind up being like a 13-bid league in the NCAA tournament. The SEC has been great. It just means more on the hardwood, okay? That's what's happening right now in the league. So I just want to be somebody that gives credit where it is due, because I don't typically read most of the comments on here, and I understand the game, right? You've got to always kind of frame the video with the title around these bigger picture ideas, and a lot of that has been the butting of heads between the Power 2 and everybody else, which is generally spearheaded by the SEC. So, there's a lot of angry SEC fans in the comments. I see them every once in a while, and I get it. I get why they wouldn't be really thrilled with a whole lot of the positioning here on this channel. I will still defend the takes on here, but I understand why they wouldn't be thrilled. So this is me just trying to prove, like, I'm not out here just to make everything. I'm not out here trying to say, hey, I don't like this, so I will take literally everything I have and say that it's wrong or it's rigged or whatever. Like anybody who doesn't like the Kansas City Chiefs winning football games right now is very likely to do. Those of you who follow me on Twitter can certainly attest to my feelings on that. I'm just saying I'm a realist, man. Look, the SEC's been great. The Big 12 has not. So it's been really disappointing. In fact, I would argue the Big 12 basketball season this year is really like the basketball equivalent to what the SEC did in football this year, right? That is, to me, such an apropos perfect comp. It's still a good league. The SEC was still a good league. And I said that over and over again. As we took shots at the SEC this year, it was because the expectation from the SEC fans and the SEC media mafia was that the league should get special treatment because it was far and away the best. And we were saying, no, it's very much just one of the best, definitely not overwhelmingly the best, and does not deserve special treatment. The Big 12 is still pretty good. Iowa State, Houston, Arizona, all look like teams that could make deep runs into the NCAA tournament. Kansas has the pedigree. They may still turn it around. I feel like there's a bit of this with Kansas, and maybe it goes for more of the entire conference. Kansas could have some of the, speaking of the Chiefs again, the ability to be like, look, what really matters is that we're playing our best at the end of the year in March. And if I just do things to make sure that we're rounding into form at that point in time, that's really what it takes. And that's where you have to be good and where you have to win. And Bill Self could be a little bit like Andy Reid like that. I mean, I think that's exactly what happened with the Chiefs this year. Everybody freaked out about them not scoring 30 points all year when it was pretty clear they were holding things back at this point in the game. They've been to 4 or 5 Super Bowls. They know, don't expend everything in the regular season. Keep some bullets in the chamber because you're going to be good enough to get to the playoffs and deep in there. And everybody loses their mind, thinks they're not any good. Well, just completely not realizing that that's a decent chunk of what's happening there. So my hope would be, for the Big 12's sake, that that's some of what's going on with Kansas. But it's still a good league, man. Texas Tech, really good team up there competing for a Big 12 title right now. But the depth isn't there. Like I said, there's a lot of blah in the league, and the peak may not be quite what we thought it was or what it would be in a quintessential Big 12 year. And look, another league is just better. And I, by the end of the season, probably would say that about the Big 10, certainly what was up at the top. So you'd look at it and say, look, the SEC, still a good league, one of the best leagues, still plenty of teams that are good, but just not elite. and there is a conference that is arguably better. So how much does this mean long-term for the Big 12, though, right? Like, that's got to be one of the questions here. I kind of started this discussion by talking about long-term plans for the Big 12 hoops and decoupling and trying to make more money because of that. Is this something that should be a real concern, right? I mean, Gonzaga, everybody said no to. UConn, at least for now, everybody has said no to. So it doesn't look like there are further basketball reinforcements coming anytime soon. It kind of has this feel like realignment may, in general, die down a bit for a couple of years, although I'll give you a year when it looks like things could kick back up, according to what Ross Dellinger said later on in the show. But this may be what you have. So should there be a concern here? Like, oh, Bill Self maybe is not figuring out the transfer portal NIL era as well as you'd like him to. Is it like, oh man, is Scott Drew losing a step here in this transfer portal NIL era? TJ Otzelberger seems to have it all figured out, but some of your real bell cow programs, are they not quite in that same boat? And how much of an issue is that? Is this something we should be concerned about long term? I would say the answer, much like if you asked me this about SEC football, even based on everything I just said, is no. There's not much concern long term. I would not say. Bill Self will get things figured out. Kansas cares too much. Self is too good. He'll adjust the portal strategy. They'll get it figured out. It's just one season. There are still too many good programs here, too many incredible coaches in the conference. We get it figured out. Maybe just with the expansion of the league, there will be a little bit more blah in the conference because of that. Not quite as much like depth top to bottom. It's like the Big Ten in football, right? You start getting bigger and more bloated, you're just going to have more blah. Just that's the reality of the situation by having more teams in the league. And the other thing, the big caveat to remember here is what the Big 12 basketball part of this discussion has that the SEC football did not, is it has a chance to completely atone for everything in the NCAA tournament. You know, like last year, there was all the complaining from the ACC about the Big 12. Brad Brownell, right, at Clemson, I believe is who it was, that was complaining about, you know, the Big 12 can just, everyone ranks them highly in the net and then they play each other and it's not really fair. And the Big 12 didn't fare very well in the NCAA tournament. And the ACC had 3 teams in the Elite 8 more than the Big 12 did. The Big 12 did not get a team in the Final Four. And suddenly the ACC had a much different looking narrative by the end of the year based on what they accomplished in the tournament. The Big 12 could totally change it around. You stick 3 teams in the Elite 8, a couple teams in the Final Four, everybody will feel a lot differently about this conference. They've got that opportunity, whereas the SEC did not take advantage, at least enough, in the college football playoff this year. So you can even change that narrative by the end of the year. But it's late enough in the season now. It's basically the midpoint of conference play. We're close to it. We're like a week away. So I felt like it was time to say that. Like, hey, the SEC has done a tremendous job with basketball this year. The Big 12 has not. It is not 5-alarm fire time. It's not total panic time, but I felt it deserved some pointing out if we're going to be totally fair about where things are at right now.